Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to pass it on to my colega, Dr. Cruz. Dr. Cruz, I'm going to pass it on to you for a brief history of HOMIES empowerment.
Oh my goodness, brief, how many hours we have? No, I'm just playing. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you're here. We definitely want you to unmute yourselves at the right time. And if you're able to just press mute for a little bit, it's such a blessing and an honor to be here with you on a Friday afternoon, Friday before big elections that have national implications, both in the town and stuff happening from here to Georgia and everywhere in between. Thank you, Ms. Ruby Pelayo. She's our caretaker of operations at HOMIES Empowerment. We're going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Ruby, if you would be able to share your screen, that would be phenomenal. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ruby. If we can go on to the next slide. Would you want to go ahead and make one more announcement about this?
Yes. Si todavía no ha presionado el canal de español, aquí están otra vez las instrucciones. Here are the instructions one more time. You go into the circle right next to reactions on the left. For me, it shows apps, but something else may show for you. You need to unmute original audio, and then you need to press Spanish. So tiene que presionar aquí en el círculo donde dice traducción. Tiene que poner donde dice unmute original audio y luego en español, es Spanish.
Thank you so much, Ruby. Unfortunately, colonialism took my original audio, so now I'm stuck speaking to you in English, a language from England, o en español, un lenguaje de España, but I will do my best. Y'all, we're going to give you the briefest history of HOMIES empowerment that we can. This young man that you see in the picture is only 10 years old. We in the so-called liberal Bay Area start locking up young people at age 10. And these are some national statistics that are really intense in our world. Every year, 3 million youth, quote unquote, drop out. More than likely, they're oftentimes pushed out of our schools. We have 1.8 million youth either in cages or in probation. And what we've seen year after year is that about 20% of Oakland youth, quote unquote, drop out or get pushed out of school every year. That is why HOMIES was born, to take on some of these national and local issues. Next slide, please. When we first started off, we started at Fremont High School and Castlemont High School at a time, if we remember, back in 2009, when the level of street violence, in particular as it relates to young people who identified as norteños and border brothers, was at an all-time high. We're now seeing a very different wave of violence that, of course, we have to take on, and we're excited to hear from the candidates about what they plan to do about the multiple levels of violence that exist in our world. We started off teaching ethnic studies, running gender circles, unity dinners, and before we knew it, 3 years later, we had garnered the Jefferson Award. But we don't do this for awards or praise. We continue to organize. Next slide, please. Our very small organization with a staff of 3 grew to a staff of over 30. And we've grown in such a way that we've pivoted to make sure that we meet the needs of our community in terms of mutual aid and solidarity. Next slide, please. Now, we operate a freedom store right next to a liquor store on 76 in MacArthur. We operate a care center on 77th and MacArthur. We operate a learning center on Seminary. And just recently, in March, we acquired some land to be able to grow our own food, the Freedom Farm. A lot of our programming is about food security, mutual aid, education, community and youth empowerment, and health prosperity. And we are so excited, y'all, that in 11 months, we are launching the Freedom School of HOMIES Empowerment. We are choosing not to be a charter school. We are choosing to be fully independent here in Deep East Oakland for and by our community, following the legacy of the Black Panther Community Learning Center and all of the freedom schools that have come before us. With that, let's transition to the next slide. We decided to ask 40 of our families. We wanted to take a snapshot of some of the issues that they care about. And we heard back from 42 families. And when they filled out a survey about community issues, this is some of the data that they shared with us. When they filled out the survey, 29% of them prefer English language and 71% prefer Spanish. Next slide, please. When we asked, do you feel that the community is safe for yourself and your family? We had 8.3% said that they do not, that they do feel safe in the community. 50% of the respondents that responded in English said no, and then 41.7% said sometimes. When we asked that same question, do you feel safe? And we had respondents in Spanish, 40% said yes, 43.3% said no, and 16.7% said sometimes. Next slide, please. When we asked our community what would make the community feel safer to you, our English respondents said, we need job security. It's not something we were ready to hear in terms of safety, but they were talking about jobs. They also said we need opportunities and resources for our sisters and brothers coming out of caging and incarceration. And we also heard that we need recreational opportunities for families. The Spanish-speaking respondents said that we need more police. They said that we need job security. They said that we need opportunities and resources for those coming out of prison. And then also that we need recreational opportunities for families. Next slide, please. We talked about how Oakland is planning to close 11 to 12 schools. And what are your thoughts? Overwhelmingly, the English-speaking respondents at 91.7% said it's a bad idea. And the rest actually said it's a horrible idea. We had no one from the English respondents that felt that the shutting down of our schools was a good idea. Our Spanish-speaking respondents, 93, if I could ask the beautiful relatives that maybe are not on mute, if they could please go on mute, very much appreciated. Thank you, family, for coming into the virtual building. 93% of our respondents said it's a bad idea to shut down our schools. Only about 1.5% said it's a good idea. And then about 1.5% said it's a horrible idea. Let's go on to the next slide. When we asked our people, these 40 plus representative families from our community, what deters you? What stops you from voting? The English-speaking respondents said about 8% is lack of information. 33% of the English-speaking respondents said citizenship status. And 58% said, I don't trust the voting process. Our Spanish-speaking respondents overwhelmingly said at 66% that their citizenship status is what deters them from voting. 26% said it's lack of information. And 6.7% said, I don't know where to vote. Next slide, please. When we asked, and we asked in particular about issues facing the Latino community, because that is one of the communities that is oftentimes not heard, what are the biggest issues facing the Latino Latinx community? What we heard is a close tie for our English-speaking respondents of limited housing, fair job opportunities, and language barriers. And for the Spanish-speaking respondents, what we heard as well is limited housing, fair job opportunities, but overwhelmingly at 52% is this idea of language barriers that exist in our community. Next slide, please. We just want to say thank you. Salamat, Shonteche, Saum Markum, muchísimas gracias. We're so honored that you're here. And at this time, it is my honor and pleasure to bring to you one of our founding board members, one of our caretakers, and the moderator for today's mayoral conversation. And we're so thankful that there's mayoral candidates in the building. I'd like to please pass it on to our very own Reverend Harry Williams.
Good afternoon, all. It is indeed an honor and a privilege and a joy to share in this moment of civic responsibility and empowerment. And we just want to tell everyone here how pleased we are that you showed up to be with us in solidarity. And to thank our political representatives and those who would apply for the candidacy of the highest seat in Oakland, who decided to be here with us. We truly, truly
Siento
appreciate
más
it.
grande en toda la ciudad de Oakland. Estamos muy agradecidos con ustedes porque estén aquí.
Mhm. So we're going to begin. We're going to begin as such. Each candidate will present some questions. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond. And then at that point, once everyone has responded, we'll go on to the next question. But we're asking that we can keep it succinct because there are a number of questions and a number of people will be responding, and then we'll be opening it up to the opportunity to the community to ask questions as well. So our first question is this. I'd like to ask, who is somebody in your life who really helped you to find your place in the public service, or some book that you read, or some philosophy that has really empowered your rise into, or your desire to be a representative? And maybe we could start with Mr. Greg Hodge for that, please.
Cool. Well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Homies Empowerment for all the work that you're doing in Deep East Oakland. I have to first acknowledge the Ohlone people on whose land we sit. It's unceded territory. Okay.
Sí, César, se escucha.
We got somebody that's speaking that hasn't muted, I guess. Secondly, and just as importantly, I want to acknowledge my ancestors. People who came before me. When you showed, Baba Cesar, you showed the image of that 10-year-old, made me think about George Stinney, who was the youngest person ever executed in the United States. I mean, it's like that, those kind of images.
Ya no se escucha en español.
Those kind of images evoke a lot. So the person, I would say there's a couple of people that have inspired me. And I think it's my parents, because my parents were public school teachers. They were involved in my hometown of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where I grew up. And I've been here for 40 plus years. So
No se
Oakland's
escucha en
my
español.
hometown. And, you know, I think that there's several reasons for that. I think one, they were about community service. They were always involved in their organizations, in their church and other places. The second person who I would list, and there's a lot of people, Hubert Henry Harrison, you know, who was a autodidactic, somebody who taught themselves. He was a speaker in Harlem. But the other person is Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm, was an African-American woman who ran for president.
¿Ya me escuchan?
Was unbought and unbossed.
Sí, le
And
escuchamos.
Okay.
Sí, ya. Sí, escucha.
Okay.
So sorry to pause. I think there's an issue going on with translation. We just
Okay.
switched translators. I'm sorry to interrupt. We just switched translators from Jasmine to Cesar Cruz. Cesar Cruz, you should be in the channel, in the Spanish channel now. Todos los que están en el interpretación para español deberían de escuchar a César en vez de a Jasmine. Sí, ¿me escuchan a mí o pueden escuchar a César?
Escuchamos a usted.
Okay, so Marina Muñoz, si puede ir al círculo de abajo donde dice interpretation, tiene que poner donde dice mute original audio y tiene que ir a Spanish para español. ¿Alguien más que está en este canal que no está todavía en el canal de español?
Sale lo mismo, sale su voz de usted.
Yo le puse español y me dio aquí.
Okay, ¿me pueden escuchar a mí?
We can hear you, Jazzy, and the main.
Sí.
Okay, can you keep it with me, Ruby? Can you keep it with me? I can translate the whole time, it's okay.
Okay, let's see.
Sorry, everybody, for the confusion. We're just trying to make sure everybody can hear and understand everything properly.
Sure.
We just switched, Jazzy, let me know. Give
Sí,
me,
ya ahorita.
okay,
Sí.
Are we all set?
Sí, ya.
we're all set. Sorry
Okay, I
about
would like
that.
to give
No está
Mr.
bien.
Hodge. I'd like to give Mr. Hodge another minute because we kind of interrupted what he was saying there. So, sir, if you had another minute that you'd like to kind of concretize what your message there.
Okay. No, thank you. It's no problem. You know, it takes a little bit of time to get the technology together if we're not in person. I appreciate the fact that you all are doing Spanish interpretation because this is half of our community are Spanish speakers. The thing I was saying is that the direct answer to your question was my parents, because they were involved in public service as school teachers. And then the other person I would say would be Shirley Chisholm, who was involved in African-American woman involved in politics. She was the first African-American woman to run for president back in the 70s. And the film that she is a documentary is about her really it's called Unbought and Unbossed. And I think that Shirley Chisholm represents an example of someone with integrity in the political process. This is during the era of, I think, Richard Nixon and those folks. So she's somebody who I really admire and appreciate. And I will yield back my time to Brother Williams.
All right. I'm just going to go in the order that the candidates appear on the device that I'm using. So the next person I would ask to answer that question would be Miss Victory. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Can I ask, is there a timer? Will somebody stop us or flag us?
We have 2 minutes, and we do have someone who will be timing there.
Yes, the clock should be on my page. You should be able to see a small clock. I believe it's your your left corner.
I see it now. Is it 1 minute or 2 minutes to respond?
2 minutes. 2 minutes response.
2 minutes, Rev? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, good evening, all. I'm Elisa Victory Villanueva. I am asking for your #1 ranked vote on this ballot that is happening in 4 days. I am a product of this city. I grew up in North Oakland, Bushrod Park area on 58th and Shattuck. It was actually a few streets over from the original Merritt College where the Black Panther Party was founded. I am heavily influenced by the Black Panthers. I have members of my family who organized with the party decades ago, who've written books about it, who still come back to Oakland and have reunions, which our city hosts proudly. And that organizing legacy is strong in our city today. We still have demands. We have platforms for Black liberation, for justice, for racial justice coalitions. Their work ethic of building power from the people up is what really inspires my leadership, my whole journey of public service. I started serving with churches in West Oakland doing food and clothing distribution. I started organizing for educational justice and equity with Oakland Youth Together as a high school student. They gave me my first paid job, and I've committed to the public's interest and to working for public service ever since. I am inspired also by my mother, who is the one who was bringing me to church and was part of the clothing and food ministries. And I wasn't deciding to do that as a child, but seeing her love and her passion for using all of her time to volunteer and to give back, for her continuing to do that, even for organizations that I've served with as an adult in Oakland, has been extremely powerful as an example of what it means really to be a faith leader, but also to be a part of this community in Oakland. I'm running to lead, I'm running to serve, I'm running to continue partnering with organizations like HOMIES. And I have served and volunteered with you all before, and the work and the programs that you provide are essential. I see our elders, our youth, our families dependent on it. And I look forward to more conversation.
Thank you. The next person I would like to ask to respond is my district council person, Ms. Thao.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Reverend Harry Williams and Dr. Cesar Cruz, for all that you do for the community and for everyone who is joining us this evening. My name is Thao, and I'm currently your council president pro tem. I am running on a progressive people slate with Elisa Victory and Baba Greg Hodge as well too. And I'm running because I am sick and tired of the status quo. You know, the status quo who actually do not put the people's voices at the forefront. Working families that are working multiple jobs, families that are underheard and underserved constantly. I grew up from a very disadvantaged family. My parents are refugee immigrants here in the United States. with no formal form of education. My sisters and brothers and I, we are the first to have a formal education, and I'm a DV survivor. I also have been homeless before with my infant son, and you know, being homeless and then going to Merritt College. And from Merritt College, I graduated valedictorian and left to go to UC Berkeley, where I study legal studies and urban planning as well too. And, you know, I always look to my father, who always taught us as children that we have to give back to the community. No matter what situation we are in, there are others who are suffering more. And so we have to do what we can to give back to community, because at the end of the day, that is all you have. You have a community. You have to spread love as part of being in community. And so I've always, you know, that's my North Star. I've always held that as how I operate in community, and not just that, but how I lead as well too. And I am just so honored to be here in front of you all today so that you can learn more about our campaign. And I would hope to have your support as your number one. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person who's the next candidate I'd like to ask to speak would be Councilperson Lauren Taylor.
Thank you, Reverend OG Harry. It is great to be here in community and just spirit with the HOMIES family and others who are here today. Yeah, my name is Lauren Taylor. I am a product of this town, third generation Oaklander, so born and raised here. It is truly my, I will say, my life's mission and purpose to make sure that those around me are benefiting and blessed with the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential. That model is one that I get from my grandmother. Now, my grandparents, they moved here in the 40s from the segregated South. And when they moved here, they moved for the promise of a better life for themselves and for future generations.
Deserve to belong here.
It is that promise that Oakland had that allows me to be in front of you today. That same dream that my grandparents had is the dream that immigrant families have when they move here today, so that their families will be better off in future generations. The same dream of mothers who are looking for their children to be better off and be able to reach their full potential regardless of the zip code that they're born into. And so that's what drives me. My grandmother, Lillian Taylor, she had that house that I think many of us have a model of, the house where there was always a bed when someone was, you know, down and out, didn't have a place to stay. There was always food that was available, warm food, a warm meal to provide comfort and solace. The prayers, I had a praying grandmother who was spiritual, actually a co-founder of a church here in Oakland, and always had advice, counsel, guidance to help people achieve their full potential. And when it comes to service, there was nothing that she held back on and that my family held back on from, you know, really supporting the neighborhood, the neighbors, the community around them. And it's that model that gave me that model that to those who much is given, much is required. And that's what's driven me my entire time and led me to the life of service that I'm in today. And so looking forward to carrying that on as Oakland's next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilperson Reid, welcome. Please share.
Thank you. I want to make sure, Reverend Harry, that I have the question right. I came on a little bit late. Is it to introduce ourselves and to give a personal reflection of someone who's inspired us?
That'd be fine. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Reid. I serve as the council member for Deep East Oakland District 7. I'm certainly running here to serve as mayor in what I believe is an opportunity for the highest seat of this office to deliver for all of us, delivering solutions, not excuses, to really put Oakland back on track for us to all live and thrive in the city, and making sure that I lead out with the change, the accountability, action, and results that we all deserve. And certainly for many of us in the community that I represent have long demanded, and we feel the weight of that across the city. I've certainly been someone that's shown up committed day one. And before I came on the city council, I served deeply with community partners, working to take care of our people, working to meet our people, our community, where they are with real services, with housing, with jobs, with food justice, with parks that are clean and open and accessible, with community gardens, as I thank the homies for helping to launch and lead out greatly with the Freedom Farm and showing up with me day one on community cleanups and helping to activate economic empowerment events and arts and culture. My experience has really been about action and accountability. I'm a resilient single mother. I'm a small business owner. I've served in state government for Senator Nancy Skinner when she was in the state assembly and state budget chair. I led out as her senior aide for Oakland and Alameda County. I've worked in corporate America, leading in Fortune 500 companies like Ford Motor Company as a regional district marketing and sales manager. And I've been deeply rooted on the ground with community, working to make sure that we deliver and meet people where they are. I've led with integrity. I lead from this deep well of having lived the issues that we face now. I've lived fighting for those who endure, like my family, the deep trauma of losing our loved ones to gun violence as we lost our son on Halloween in 2013. I fight for those who face the threat of homelessness and housing instability, food insecurity, unemployment, domestic abuse, as I am a survivor, mental health issues. Those are the issues that's before us, and we're going to have contagious hope and faith and a courageous leader to really bring it through. It was instilled in me as one of the oldest born grandchildren of 130 plus grandchildren on my father's side with his siblings. My great grandmother, May Reid, she led the charge.
So sorry to interrupt, that was time.
Advocacy, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, candidates. Our next question is this. There has been a lot of cynicism around the electoral policies and politics. In fact, one of the members of HOMIES that I mentioned the candidates forum to use the word politics. And what he meant by that was that there has been in his eye view, people run for political office because they have an agenda that does not only serve the people, but they tell folk what they want to hear because there are people that they want to garner favors from, or they have a platform or some way to profit from this. There's a great cynicism in Oakland, especially among young people, about whether the political process is effective. And then there are those who cannot vote because they have either legal issues or they might be undocumented. And they're wondering, why are we even addressing this? Is this for real? If I could pose that question to you, what would you say to someone who has a deep cynicism about whether the process is for real, and whether whether you all are really going to make a difference if elected into office? I'm going to again start with I'll go from backward, not backward, but I'll start with the last candidate and work back to the first. Councilperson Treva Reid, would you answer that question first, please?
Is it addressing the cynicism and around politicking and politicking?
Around city politics, many people won't vote because they won't go to the polls, even if they're registered, because they don't believe that the political structure can work for people in deep East Oakland, for poor people, for people who are on the margins. They don't believe that anyone really cares, and they don't believe that if you got in your seat, you would use that platform to empower the people. What would you say to that, please?
Well, I would say that as the council member for Deep East Oakland, they feel the weight of what has been real for them, that there has been systemic disinvestment in this part of our community. I serve a district that's 51% Latino and over 30% Black, and we have felt the weight of just the crippling impact of public safety issues, of homelessness, of unemployment, of business closures, and we've too long felt forgotten, left out, shut out, kept out, and it's challenging as a council member to get council members to join with us, like Councilmember Lauren Taylor and I led out for the Emerald New Deal with a group of 40 coalition members from the community, formerly incarcerated returning citizens, working to ensure that we delivered more equitably, even the cannabis dollars from the war on drugs and the impact on this community, to show up for this community with jobs, with workforce training, with rental assistance, with affordable home ownership programs. And so what they feel is true. We have been left out, and we've never had representation from this part of the city at the highest seat of this office. We've never had a mayor serving from Deep East Oakland. We've never had that representation leading out, ensuring that a $3.8 billion budget is invested equitably all over the city, that we don't forget about the parts of the city that have been long left out, like East Oakland. And so what our neighbors feel is real. And so we're talking about change and accountability and action and results. It's going to take us coming into a seat of power to ensure that Oakland is not forgotten, and those who have been most impacted and disenfranchised and underserved and underrepresented have someone at that seat fighting for them to have what they deserve, what they've long demanded, and what we all need to really come through with a just, equitable, and resilient recovery. I believe that I represent that type of leader that's going to show up for us and with us at the table and ensuring that leaders from this part of the community, that they have roles of leadership, that they can be effective, that we have more of our Latino community represented in different roles and seats of our government, as well as our Black community members all over the city. They will be represented with me.
Thank you. Councilperson Lauren Taylor.
Yes, thank you for this question, because it's extremely important to acknowledge that we have a number of residents who are disenfranchised, feel as though there's nothing they can do when it comes to the politics and using government to work for them. The number of residents who come to me and talk about how they are giving up Oakland to actually solve problems, to make change and move forward, it is frankly, I will say, it's heartbreaking, because we have a job and
Lauren Taylor?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but it's really hard to hear you. It sounds very like robotish. I'm not sure if it's your internet.
Let me try. Can you guys hear me now?
No.
No, it's not good. All right. Here, let's see, maybe if I turn the video off, can you guys hear me okay? Or not change, no change?
No. We can possibly pass it to the
Maybe
next person.
jump off and jump
log
back
in
on,
again.
Lauren.
Okay, I'll try to remove it.
Okay, Rev, you can pass it to the next person.
Okay. Councilperson Sheng Thao, would you answer that question, please?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely, we have to have a mayor who can work and actually put at the forefront, those communities that have been underserved and marginalized. And we have to have somebody who can work with the city council. It is incredibly important that the mayor respects the city council and vice versa. And that's why I have the honor of having the support of the majority of the current city council members. They are supporting me to be the next mayor because they know that I come with that collaborative leadership to move the city forward. I am not the status quo candidate. No, Libby Schaaf did not endorse me, not for 1, not for 2, not for 3, 4, or 5. Because I have no problem calling her out, like I called her out on her $70 million that she allowed to leave City Hall without any tracking. I would also say that, yes, it is politics. When you're taking money from ABI Foundry, like my colleagues have who are running against me. We know that ABI Foundry is being sued by Attorney General Rob Bonta, is in East Oakland, where our low-income Black and Brown families live, and it causes cancer. It causes cancer, and that's the truth. We see that with Mills College, just follow the money. We see with Mills College, it's being rezoned for luxury condos. And that was something that Councilmember Lauren Taylor led on. It's egregious when we see people who are unhoused on the streets, unhoused, our neighbors, people who have lived here for generations, and yet it's being rezoned for luxury condos. Eastmont Mall, 200 market rate housing, with a set aside of only 20 special affordable housing units. That is deeply disturbing. Follow the track record. I am proud to have fought for 197 affordable units in my district right now, in the Laurel Business District. 197 have already broken ground about 2 months ago. We have to be very clear about who we vote to be our next mayor, because it is going to change the trajectory of whether we as a community, our diverse community, can live here or will not, or be locked out and have to move.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, Councilperson Taylor, are you ready to, are you able to speak to us now? You're in mute, sir. Councilperson Taylor, are you able to speak now? Sir, I don't hear you. We're going to come back to you. I'm going to go to Mr. Greg Hodge at this time.
Cool. No, it's a great question, and this question is embedded in our history. This country has a history of white supremacy, anti-Black racism, anti-immigrant racism. There's some historic reasons and contemporary reasons that things don't work for us. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we have to say is that, you know, in our grandparents' era, there was violent intimidation to what we're seeing in Arizona and a few other places, poll taxes and poll tests, and, you know, people being left off of the voter rolls and the intense voter suppression. To me, it ought to be said to younger people in particular who say that they have this cynical thing, even if you don't vote for any of us, even if you don't vote for any of the ballot measures, vote your grandmama in. Vote right in the name of someone from a symbolic place that matters. Then we can talk about the things that we voted on locally that have actually made a difference. And I think that one of the things we say to younger people, because generally this comment comes from younger people, is if you were around to vote for 3 strikes, would you have voted against it? The law that basically required on the 3rd felony that you were going to go to jail for 20 to life. Would you have voted on Prop 209? Prop 209 bars, you know, young people from attending UC schools like the way that Shane did, right? And others in the community. Would you have voted for the Oakland Fund for Children and Youth that sets aside resources every year for the kind of programs that HOMIES Empowerment, Freedom Schools, which I'm a Freedom Schools founder, other schools around the city, to be able to do after school programming? And so I think that it's really important to put it in the historical place that we want to move from political transactions to systems transformation, and that some of us have the experience of working through COVID with the African American Response Circle, Resilient Fruitvale, Healthy Havens Court, Oakland AIP Unite, to make demands to our county government to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Ms. Victory, would you answer that question, please?
Only 2 minutes. I'll say our democracy is in crisis. Voter suppression definitely still exists, especially across our country, but even here. This is personal to me as someone who was illegally disqualified from this ballot for 2 weeks by our city and had to fight my way back, having knowledge of our government laws as the only government attorney and having worked in our city attorney's office. There's still 3 other people who are on your ballot because of what our city has done. Our Oakland youth should have the right to vote for their school board candidates in this election right now, but our county registrar has not implemented it and is on an extended 2-year timeline. People who are ex-felons, formerly convicted of felonies and incarcerated, have the right to vote. That was restored 2 years ago. I'm finding every single day people do not know, and part of that is intentional. As Baba said, this is historical, especially against non-white peoples in this country, of tying rights to property or to money. We have to ensure that our democracy is real for every part of our community. There's a reason why Deep East Oakland districts have historically had the lowest voter registration and voter turnout. When our city was founded, it was founded as a council manager government. There was no mayor position. It was added years later, decades later, and it quite literally represents the people. This is your seat. It's important that you vote. It's important that you vote for somebody who's not going to be represented, especially those who already have the right and are being disenfranchised in our city, in our county right now. I'm running to be a public servant, not a politician. I am funded by the people. I'm proud to be the top in our lowest contributions, and don't need money to propel me forward because I'm still remain competitive. I've still shown up. I've still been on the ground in all of our districts because I'm from this city and I'm running to serve you all, to represent you all. And I'm going to continue what I'm doing regardless of the politicking of the money that's funding other candidates in this race. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Taylor, are you able to speak to this issue there?
I am back. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly, yes.
Great. So I've switched to my phone, but yeah, thank you for allowing me a little bit of grace here. To wrap up, yes, our people are disenfranchised, and we have to make sure that the government is set up
to support and serve them. That means we have to have representatives and leaders who are prioritizing Oaklanders, and particularly those most disenfranchised, those most marginalized in the process. And that's exactly what I have been doing from day one, long before I came into office. Because I'm a kid from Oakland, because I didn't climb through the ranks as a intern and then a staffer and a chief of staff, and I'm merely, trying to figure out my next career move. Instead, I'm focused on Oakland and moving Oaklanders forward. That's why I did partner with Councilmember Reid and bring forth the solution that the people of Oakland brought up, the Emerald New Deal, to bring more than $160 million into the Black and brown communities that have been targeted by the war on drugs. That is something that we supported, but others on the council, even the other council members who are running for office, for mayor, did not support. Also, when it comes to making sure that we have equitable investments into East Oakland flatlands, where we haven't historically done, and like our parks investments, where we've brought more than $6 million directly to be invested into Arroyo Viejo, and even more to Rainbow Rec and Concordia Parks in District 6. The housing development in partnership with our community groups, like the Black Cultural Zone and others that are led by those on the ground in the community, focusing on affordable housing for the community. Those are projects that I have been glad to lead on and will continue to lead on as Oakland's next mayor. And not to mention bringing more than $8 million from the state to focus on small businesses being created by East Oaklanders for East Oaklanders, really addressing those who have been marginalized, haven't had access to capital as well. So that's what I look forward to continuing to expand on, to help folks realize that, yes, the government is working for them, that people are leading who are just like them, born and raised from the soil that we stand on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to start again back with Mr. Hodge with this next question. Many of the people that that are part of HOMIES Empowerment and Creative Community have children in the public school system. And this year we were appalled when it was announced that Parker Elementary School would be closing its doors. HOMIES was involved in marches and demonstrations. We supported those who had to sit in, and we have just been dismayed as we found that not only has that school closed, but there's an orchestrated plan to close as many as 12 different schools in our city. What are your thoughts about that? And what would you do? How do you feel about that? And if you're opposed to it, what would you do to help our children who have to cross gang lines and face human predators because now they can't go to school in their neighborhoods? What would you say to the parents, and what would you do if elected mayor? We're going to start with Mr. Hodge.
Yeah. As someone who served on the school board for 8 years, I have a pretty deep understanding and a deep concern about what happens with our children here in Oakland. The first thing that we should do is have a moratorium on any additional school closures. And we should do that based on a couple of ideas that I have. One is that we need to have parent, student-led education summit, where we actually listen to what parents and students, as well as the staff, teachers, administrators, labor, what we all think about what needs to happen with our schools. I think that without that kind of a concerted effort, that kind of a convening, and not a school board meeting where people get to talk for 2 minutes, but really a serious community discussion about what our community deserves. The second thing I do is part of that process is have an independent audit of the finances of Oakland Unified, because none of us really trust the numbers that we hear, right? And depending on who's speaking to those numbers, you don't really trust the budget. And I think that's an important step, because we have to be really clear about the number of schools that Oakland Unified can actually keep open and keep fully resourced. It's my belief that Black and brown children are being done a disservice when we keep some schools open, some schools closed, and none of these schools serve them culturally. They're not culturally proficient. The curriculum that you're going to have with the Freedom School that you're talking about is closer to Ile Omode. I was a parent, founding parent of that school. We were around for 37 years educating our children as an independent institution. So we learned some things from that process. that Black and brown kids have to learn their history, have to learn their culture, have to be able to engage with their identity in order for them to actually be interested in learning. So the second thing, and the second piece of this, very quickly, we need to have serious mental health services provided to our kids and our families, given the anxiety, the social distancing, and all of what has happened through COVID. There's a whole lot more to be said about it, but I'll leave it there with a couple of those ideas.
Thank you. Ms. Victory?
Thank you for the question. We need to stop school closures. I am proud to be endorsed by a majority of our school board candidates who are running on your ballot on that platform of stopping closures and rescinding the current plan to close 10 plus of our public schools. I'm also endorsed by Mike Hutchinson, who is our current District 5 school board director and has been championing this. I was also at Parker during the occupation of our community school, where people reopened the school to serve the community. I saw students there who were going to get lunch, who were going to learn classes, to learn gardening, to do art, to have a space where they weren't hanging out in the middle of their street. And I had a youth there that was doing voter registration, and she was educating about the Oakland youth vote, which sadly is not being implemented. But we absolutely need a stronger partnership with our school district and the city, which are separate entities, have separate budgets. I can't solely control what the school board members do, but having that communication relationship already will bleed into our elected roles as mayor and as school board directors. And we need to have constant meetings about what is going on, what is their plan. I went to school in Berkeley Unified. I caught AC Transit and depended on BART to get to school every day. I couldn't go to my neighborhood school, which was Oakland Tech, because they were already failing Black students at much higher rates. There was already been lack of services, and this was decades ago. My mother was a teacher in Oakland Hills as well for Alameda County Head Start. And so education has been in crisis for so many families and communities, even before our schools were being closed. We've had the Reparations for Black Students campaign. We've had the Police-Free Schools campaign for 10 years, talking about the extreme disparity in Black and brown youth that were being referred to our juvenile justice system. We absolutely need to invest more in our education, in our youth. Our city needs to do its part by cleaning up our parks, our rec centers, investing in youth employment and job opportunities, also providing basic services like we had our food distribution at our campuses. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Sheng Thao.
Yes, this is extremely important for me. I'm against the school closure. There was no process that was conducted. And as a daughter of immigrants, refugees, my mom didn't know how to speak English. She didn't know how to drive. And if my community school closed, it's not as easy as, well, you'll go to the next school. The bottom line is that I wouldn't be going to school. And I know that, I think that people should ask themselves, when school closures were happening, where was the mayor? She actually supports the school closure, along with Councilmember Taylor, who supports the school closures as well too. And it's, for me, I'm just going to be very honest, because that's how I know how to be, is just to be myself. And it's very disgusting to see that it is in the Black and brown and low income communities that these schools are slated to close. That we know that when Councilmember Fife stood up with Director Van Cedric Williams to say, no, schools are not closing in our districts, that they took off the West Oakland schools. But it was the inability of the leaders of District 6 and District 7 to come together to say, not in our district. They actually agreed with it. And so for me, it's about that is the part of the politicking, right? And it's not just that, but it's also about who is actually supporting the different candidates. I am a candidate who is unafraid to be working hard for the people. And more so than that, it's a land grab. Right? All of these schools, look at where all the locations are at. It's a land grab, just like it's a land grab with Mills College as well too. They want to build luxury housing. They want to develop and make sure that we, the people, the working class people, are headed out the door. And also in regards to police being on campus, I believe there shouldn't be any guns on campus. But again, because this is a forum about, to learn more about our differences and why we are different from each other. I know that Councilmember Taylor supports having police on campus with guns. I mean, he stated so himself in interviews before. And Head Start closure, it was his office who led the effort to close down Head Starts. And it was myself, Councilmember Council President Bass and Vice Mayor Kaplan, who came together to fight for money to keep Head Start open.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Treva Reid.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I lead with integrity, and I think that it continues to be disrespectful to hear a council colleague speak for me on things that are not true. It was unfathomable in the midst of this persisting pandemic that OUSD trustees voted to close and merge 11 plus schools. 5 of those schools were in District 7. It was a decision that did not have a clear plan. It was a decision that disproportionately impacted Black and Brown students. My district is one of the Blackest and Brownest districts in the city, and it did not provide us any opportunity as a community, including me as the chair of education partnerships, to weigh in without a race and equity analysis. And so I stood with our schools. I marched, not just in words, I attended rallies, I marched from one school to the next to really take on the issues that were before us. And I also served on the legislative committee with those who were against school closures to put higher demands on our state partners with their engagement and involvement. That is the truth. And I'll continue to work with our state legislators to progress on a plan with OUSD, certainly to ensure stronger financial footing to keep Oakland schools open. And we're still working to keep those schools in District 7 open. Let me tell you some of the things that I have done. I have supported a reparations for Black students. I've joined that rally. I've engaged in the school community. We meet with school principals often. We're still working to engage with Brookfield and Grass Valley. I've secured $500 million in community grants serving East Oakland youth organizations, EOYDC, where I serve on the board, HOMIES Empowerment, East Oakland Boxing Association, Youth Uprisers, Kingmakers, Black Cultural Zone Messengers, Getting Our Kids Jobs, Oakland Feather River Camp, Linda Hand Foundation, the OK program. At Councilmembers, I helped to secure $150,000 in a corporate donation to create an apprenticeship trades program at Councilmembers for students who want to get prepared with internships, stipends, mentors. So when they graduate and may not go into college, they are available and ready to come into 6-figure jobs, 100,000 plus jobs in partnership with our building trades. When our students were not feeling safe leaving Councilmembers, I secured a $45,000 free rideshare service to get our schools home safely. I led that, and I'll continue to lead that and more.
All right. Thank you, Councilperson Taylor.
Thank you for that. I want to first begin by just acknowledging that there are a lot of folks who, I guess, feel as though they're entitled to speak for people as though they know what's in their heads and what they're thinking. And so I do want to just counter a couple of things that were said. First of all, we need to acknowledge that a good, well-performing public school accessible in our neighborhoods is something that we absolutely have to fight for and make sure exists. I'm not in favor of school closures. I'm also not in favor of schools that are underperforming our kids. When our kids have schools that are 75% or more of the students are performing below grade level, we have to acknowledge that we are failing and we have to do things better. That requires a different conversation. We need to focus on outcomes. Are our kids being prepared for the life that they need to lead so that they can be successful in moving forward? That means we've got to make our schools more attractive and bring more folks. When it comes to really investing in our public schools so that they can serve our residents at scale, that's been something that I've been focused on my entire, I will say, professional career long before being on the council. I worked with the 100 Black men of the Bay Area to establish a community school focused on the achievement gap faced by Black and Brown students, really addressing those gaps in a way that public schools, charter schools, private schools have been lacking. That's what we need to do. That's why I'm inspired by the HOMIES Freedom School that's being envisioned. But I hope that there's a way that that school can be developed in a way where it's in district. And so the kids that are coming into that school, those dollars go towards building a stronger, broader ecosystem of schools, of public schools, because we know that the students that are not going to the public schools, those dollars do not go in. Speaking of which, I have advocated for and am continuing to advocate for a change to the school funding formula so that we get more of the dollars to our school district that are otherwise being siphoned away by days that the students are not in school or other solutions as well. And I have been in partnership really making sure that we have the solutions to keep our kids safe in school as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And as our school becomes, as we get closer and closer to the opening date, we will be inviting all of you to different open houses and to get your input on what we can do as we seek to empower our community educationally. Homies Empowerment is truly, truly committed to that. The next question I want to ask is one that kind of brings tears to my eyes. I really get emotional when I think about it. And we're going to ask about the question of violence, because we live in the community. And each one of us, there's 65 people here on this call right now. And most of us live in East Oakland, and we have lost people. And for a young man I was mentoring a few weeks ago, he was walking down the street and he got shot in. He was a dancer, and he was a turf dancer, and he got shot in the hip by a stray bullet. And up and down the street, you'll see bullet holes everywhere. We see helicopters swooping down. And people just don't feel safe. The homicides have truly impacted deep East Oakland in an awful way. And when we call the police, we're not getting any responses. And it seems as though we've been abandoned by the city, as the bloodshed has been, the blood has been leaking in the streets. If you were elected mayor, what would you do to keep us safer? And I'm going to start with Ms. Treva Reid here for this question.
Well, thank you, Reverend Harry. The trauma that we feel in this city, we feel that crippling weight here in District 6 and District 7, District 5 in East Oakland, where the district that we serve now, more than half of the lives that are lost in the city are lost in this part of the city. And we know that more than 60% of them have been, more than 60 to 70% of them have been Black, and a significant number, over 30%, have been Latino. And so we've got to address the issue of the loss of life, trauma, violence of every kind. And that has been my charge from day one. As a mother who's lost our own son to gun violence and feeling the weight of what I live in this community, it's been something that I led out on. I did not vote in that budget last year to freeze officers, to reduce our 3 911 response surge teams, or to remove all the traffic enforcement citywide. What I did do was lift up a gun violence resolution to declare a public health emergency and crisis in this city. It called on the city to make deeper investments into Department of Violence Prevention, Intervention, and Healing and Trauma Care. It also called on the county to give more equitably their $300 million of American Rescue funds back into Oakland for workforce readiness, for jobs, for mental health services, for life coaches, for violence interruption, making sure that we've got enough criminal investigators to address the 1,000 unsolved homicides and the 28,000 plus incidents of crimes that have been reported, making sure that we've got 911 officers available or responders available when the data was showing that Black women were calling across this city the most, and we're not getting a response. And so we owe our city the response that we deserve. We also have to have adequate police resources. We know that we're down significantly due to attrition, due to the morale. And so as mayor, making sure that I budget at least 4 police academies, Oakland grown pipeline being built up, making sure that we expand macro 24/7 and citywide, where we've launched it in East and West Oakland. That needs to get built out and it needs to be fully funded. Making sure that we double the investment in violence prevention, intervention, school safety initiatives, gender-based violence initiatives, and ensure that we've got increased surveillance technology that's leveraged all over the city that have helped
That is time.
in East Oakland and citywide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Sheng Thao, please.
Thank you for this question. Absolutely. You know, I truly believe that the way that we are able to lead for your next mayor, it's really, you know, you have to follow what we have done already as council members, our policies, right? To really see who is going to be about the people. And I am honored to, you know, stand with my council colleague who's actually, I see in the room today, Councilmember Fife. And I was actually the only mayoral candidate to invest into violence prevention and violence interrupters. My other 2 colleagues refused to vote on that budget. And not just that, but I've been, yes, we have vacancies in our police department. And so I rolled up my sleeves and worked with the police chief and others to ensure that we diversified our force, localize our force, and not just that, but ensure that we were that we were keeping our officers here in the city of Oakland and not losing them. That is the real work that we need to do. And that is the policies that I put forward. In regards to macro, I was an early champion of macro. It now is housed under the fire department. And, you know, to be honest with you, you know, we can tell you what, you know, sounds good right now because we know that it's working. But there were people who are running against me who fought tooth and nail against macro when it was coming forward. You know, Vice Mayor Kaplan came up with macro first, and the mayor did not support it. And you can just assume who else did not support it, who's running against me. But I was an early champion of macro. And yes, we do need to expand that and make it sure that it is across the whole city. More so than that, creating pathways for our young people, making sure that we are working with Peralta colleges, making sure that we are creating, you know, pipelines to city work, because those are great paid union jobs. And why shouldn't it be Oaklanders who receives these jobs? Why isn't Oaklanders who are patrolling our streets? More so than that, that's why I went to go fight for the $2 million to fund Deep East Oakland Parks. $2 million directly for Deep East Oakland Parks, because I know that if we can activate our parks and then fund our community-based organizations to create active programming, like learning how to do, you know, learning how to garden and what have you, that we are all safer. We are all better for them.
Thank you. Mr. Greg Hodge, would you answer that question, please?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. It's the thing that's at the top of mind of most people who live in Oakland. Rev, I'm sorry for the young person who you were mentoring who was hurt. This issue affects everybody. I've buried, as a minister, and eulogized kids like Yaheem King, one of my best friend's kids, who was shot and killed years ago at Berkeley High. There was a young man who was shot and killed on my corner a couple years ago, and my son Kumi was the first person to reach him and saw his life leave his body. I mean, so this is like not in theory. I mean, this is like Dirk Tillison, who's one of my friends, who was shot and killed in a home invasion. And so I think that there's a fundamental shift that we need to have in this city. A lot of what's been talked about is tinkering. It's tinkering around a system that does not work. And I think that we have to, this is one of the places where I think systems transformation is critical. One of the things we should do, and I agree with the statements that have been made around macro, it's a good pilot, it's the beginnings of what we need to do around nonviolent reactions and responses. But I think that one of the other things that we need to do is, whether I'm mayor or not, I'll push for this. In Richmond, the Richmond Office of Neighborhood Safety was established back in 2008. I was one of 3 consultants that helped establish that office. And in a 5-year period, we brought down the homicide rate in Richmond by 70%, 70. Why? Because the model called for formerly incarcerated folks, family members who were returning citizens who came home, who would come back to Oakland, who would then work with the young people in our community as part of a jobs reentry program, while giving opportunities for education, for jobs, for all kinds of things for the young people. That's at the center of that model. And Oakland did not follow that model, despite advice to do so. So that's one of the things that we can do to make DVP even stronger than what it already is.
Thank you. Councilperson Taylor.
Yeah, thank you for that. I first want to acknowledge that we in Oakland have to have the both and solution when it comes to keeping our communities safe. Recognizing that, yes, the root cause of the public safety issues, the crime, the elements that we see is racism and lack of economic opportunities. And so we have to aggressively invest in addressing these root causes in a way that allows people to achieve more. At the same time, we have to be able to be appropriately resourced to address these calls for service when people are in need of help and in need of protection. We cannot tolerate having bullets flying in our schools, risking the lives of our babies. And so we have to be able to do the both and that's what I have consistently advocated for. So yes, as the architect and one of the co-chairs of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, I helped to bring together Oaklanders from across the city, representing different ethnicities, different geographies, different perspectives on public safety. I think we just heard it in the statistics that were read by Dr. Cruz, where some in the community that was surveyed said, yes, we need more police, and some said, we don't. That's a bridge we have to come to address, because there are root causes that we have to move forward on. And so I'm glad to have been one of the original folks who sat down to explore how we actually make macro happen. I sat down with the Cahoots team when they came from Oregon, really rolling up sleeves, getting into the details, and having an intern focused on exactly that, moving it forward. I was one of the proponents of bringing the first $20 million that we found through the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force to address violence prevention and really impacting that. And that's why I supported that and the addition of police academies in order to make sure we had adequate staffing, both civilian and sworn officers, to respond and support our community safety needs. And also standing up for East Oakland when it has been neglected by starving East Oakland parks. Life was a part of that budget that I and Councilmember Reid voted against, instead helping to invest in the community in other ways. And so I look forward to continuing to do the both and as mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Victory, please.
Thank you for the question. I know there's people even on this call who've lost a lot of folks, even recently. Some of y'all have visited you after shootings that have happened in the last month or so. I, again, am raised here. I've experienced people dying my entire life in this city. Horrific shootings on the streets, outside of our schools. This is not new. And the disparity of where it's happening and who it's happening to is also not new. So we need to stop trying the old solutions, the old plans, because they're not working. Our police department is also uniquely entering its 20th year of federal oversight and monitoring for a settlement agreement that resulted from a lawsuit where they were excessively abusing and racially profiling, Black Oaklanders. So I agree that we need policing services that are high quality. We invest in that department, the highest out of all of our city departments, and we need a return on that high investment. What we don't need is unconstitutional policing, unaccountable and unchecked police spending in line with what our auditor and our Budget Advisory Commission have reported. We need police to be focused on prioritizing the areas of need and the types of calls, emergency 911, and actually solving crimes, not on criminalizing poverty, not on supervising homeless encampment cleanups. We have other employees, other staff, other departments that need to be resourced to do that work in line with the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force recommendations, 80+ that were about how police can focus on doing their jobs, ones that they're highly trained and specialized to do. I've represented officers. I have also sued police. I am a police practices attorney. I've advised our city, our counties throughout this state on their policing systems, on police staffing, police budgeting, accountability, and oversight. And I will implement the actions and recommendations and stop studying and using the old failed policies. Thank you.
You know, I said in my last question, I said, this one causes me to cry. And this is another question I'm going to ask you that definitely does bring tears to my eyes, because Homies Empowerment is located in deep East Oakland, California. And the problem of homelessness is at an all-time high. I've lived in Oakland for 20 years. I've never seen it the way it is now. Today, we went out on Fridays, we have a group called Fishes and Lows through Homies, where we go out to the encampments. And I was talking to a woman today about the people who live in the encampment on Hagenberger. And I said, why aren't so many of them not here right now as we're giving out food and resources? She said, oh, plenty of them work. Plenty of the people out here work. Plenty of the people that live here have jobs. So that, you know, we have an idea, a picture of who these people are, but many of them work. That's why they're not there in the daytime. Many of the people who come to Homies Empowerment every week for food and for shoes and other resources, they said, help me, I need a place to live. Many of us on this line are doubled up, two or three families in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. If you were elected mayor, then we have the problem of gentrification, where the prices of housing is astronomical. If you were elected mayor, what would you do to help us? To help the community, to empower the community so that we can stay here. Many of us have been moved out of Oakland because we could no longer afford to stay in the city that we love. What would you do to help us? And I'm going to start with Miss Victory.
Thank you for this question. I've been homeless in the city when my mother was working 2 jobs as a teacher. One, we're not paying our essential workers and our working class families enough, and we never have been. We need to ensure that we are actually getting people off of the streets and replenishing our shelter bed capacity, our temporary shelters, and our permanent housing so that we can get people off of the streets, because essentially our entire city is becoming a homeless encampment. Right, all of our parks, all of our public transit, all of our roadways, our freeway underpasses, because our city will not open up its own lands, will not use the funding. As we heard, the city auditor reported $70 million untracked, not a single person housed. We don't have a housing crisis. We have a crisis of leadership that has allowed the homelessness problem to proliferate with access to historic resources, to emergency powers under our emergency declaration that was made back in 2018. I will use those powers to work to solve our problems, not to manage them as our goal. I also want to protect our current affordable housing and expand our affordable units. I am a renter myself. I had my rent increase this month. This is personal to me. We need to have rental assistance programs. We need to make sure the state is actually paying out their 100% rent relief from COVID. We need to have our mortgage assistance program so that renters can actually become owners, because so many people are burdened by rent in the city. Again, even a majority of our police force does not live here. So we need to have housing even for our workers. We need to have housing for our students, housing for our teachers. I'm running on public banking. That is something I advised our city on in San Francisco on back in 2014 about how to have a mechanism for us to fund the development of affordable housing and control that housing ourselves. And this restores some of the powers that we used to have with redevelopment agencies that were outlawed by the state under Jerry Brown. And so this is not necessarily new, but I've already done some of the initial research years ago and have been working with coalitions regionally. Our county is doing a feasibility study right now, and I am running to implement those new tools so that we can build more housing and control the pricing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Treva Reid.
Well, we are in a humanitarian crisis. No Oakland resident should be sleeping in streets, in parks, cars, under freeways, in school paths. And this crisis has disproportionately impacted communities of color, especially Black people, where we represent 60% of those who are unhoused and 40% of those who've been displaced from Oakland. I grew up living 20 to 30 deep in a 3-bedroom. My first home, deeply affordable, low-income housing, was $60 a month. So addressing this homeless crisis, securing increased state and federal funding will be my top priority as mayor. I will ensure that we've got also the adequate staff to enforce the encampment management policy being compassionately implemented to give our neighbors the dignity of a home. We've got 850 plus encampments and a staff that's just at 4. That is not an act of intentionality or urgency to address bringing our neighbors into housing dignity. As mayor, I'm going to restructure the funding to increase temporary and permanent housing. We have mismanaged, misappropriated funding to manage the crisis on the ground instead of using $70+ million to bring people into housing, prioritizing the use of our public land, fast tracking through our planning and building department the approval of deeply affordable and workforce housing. The crisis is layered. There's a lot of different factors. We need the county at the table. We need the state and federal partners at the table. I truly believe that it's been a systemic disinvestment and truly egregious that we've not had subsidies and housing vouchers to help people meet the incredible costs that we now have in this market due to gentrification. The average renter, like I'm a renter, the average renter though, is making only $33,000 a month. That is not sufficient income to be able to sustain. And so we've got to be able to offset those costs. We've certainly, in my role, I've seeded funding from the Coliseum Joint Power Authority to establish hotel vacancies, to establish hotel residencies where we've had vacancies, to invest in transitional housing for our tiny home villages, for our youth and young adults. I prioritize and using public city land to support the development of deeply affordable housing. And I'm on the Black Regional Housing Task Force that's put forth a request for $500 into this region in Oakland. And I've advanced 800 affordable housing units in this district.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilperson. Councilperson Lauren Taylor, please.
Thank you for that. Again, there's some fundamental principles that we have to acknowledge. First of all, the only true solution for homelessness is housing. We have to make sure that we are focused on that as an ultimate goal, even while we deal with the, I will say, the path to getting there. When we look at the situation that's occurring, it is deeply personal to me because more than half of my family who I grew up here with in Oakland is no longer living here because they've been displaced, either into other cities or other states, or even onto the streets. I've worked with family members who have struggled through homelessness, helping them get back on their feet. And yes, we have to, again, have a multi-pronged approach that addresses the multiple challenges that impact what we see, and I will say the results that our community experiences. We've got to be able to identify the ways that we can prevent folks from becoming unhoused, also supporting those who are unhoused in the temporary period until we can get them transitioned into long-term, stable, sustainable housing. That requires that we focus on reducing the cost of housing. These are things that I have worked on with nonprofit affordable housing developers, working with organizations like the Black Cultural Zone, like East Bay Prep, like others who are focused on ways that we can do affordable by design while we bring resources from the city to address this. But it's also important to acknowledge that we don't have enough resources in the city on our own to address the affordable housing crisis, where home prices over the past 20 years went up by 270%, when average household incomes only went up by 7%. So we have to work with our county, state, federal partners in ways that I have done, even as I have sought ways to not only reduce the cost of housing, but increase earning potential in what our residents make, creating the financial security, like the creation of East Side Oakland Ventures, ESO Ventures. We brought more than $8 million from the state to invest in Black and brown businesses here in East Oakland. And again, we can't do it alone. We also have to focus on services, not just structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Greg Hodge. Okay. Ms. Shang Tao, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me okay, Reverend?
Yes.
I'm honored to be a co-author with Councilmember Thao to formulate EIFD for East Oakland and West Oakland specifically. This is a way that we can fund deeply affordable and moderate rate housing and social housing as well too. We know that under the current administration, not only did she not track, I think on purpose, the $70 million that left City Hall doors, but also they have only built market rate housing, right? So 130% of market rate housing and only 24% of deeply affordable and moderate rate housing. And so that is part of the reason why we see so many of our unhoused brothers and sisters on the streets. Again, I have worked hand in glove with people with a private developer in my district to get 197 units of affordable housing in the Laurel District. I'm proud of that. I'm also proud to have the strong support of our city workers, and that is going to be key. And I know that Councilmember Taylor has stated in interviews that he's worried that I will support our city workers when it comes to salary and wage increases. Well, guess what? That's absolutely right. I believe that our city workers should be able to live here, play here, and work in the same city. Also, ACE has given me an A for in regards to renters. I am a renter myself, and I have been graded at an A with ACE, whereas my counterpart, my opponent, has been given an F. Also, not just that, but let's just follow the money as well. But before I say that, I just want to say that I'm pretty upset today because there has been retaliation against Reverend Billy Dixon. He is the co-chair of Ceasefire, and Mayor Libby Schaaf had sidelined him, suspended him because he supports my campaign and my public safety plan. And so it is just disgusting how people are playing with politics and playing with people's lives. But with that being said, we need to also ensure that we are following the money. The campaign, my campaign is funded by nurses, firefighters, teachers, grocery workers, and bus drivers. Whereas if you look at Lauren's campaign, it's funded by luxury condo developers. Talk is really cheap. In politics, is about fun. It's about the money. So follow the money.
Thank you, candidates. We certainly appreciate these answers. They were, and at this time, what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to the folk here.
I don't think I had a chance to respond to that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go right ahead. I'm sorry, Baba. Go right ahead, please.
That's okay. I'm gonna give it to your head and not your heart, as we say,
yes.
right? You know, this is a really important issue, and that housing is a human right. It is not something that is a privilege. It is not something that we should take for granted at all. Historically, Dr. King went to Chicago to live in the projects in that city, Robert Taylor Homes, I think, to demonstrate the idea that housing was in America is unacceptable. Coming closer to home, the Black Panther Party's 10-point plan included the statement that we are demanding housing that's fit for human beings. So this issue is not a new issue for us. It has gotten to be more important for us and more front of mind for us, because I think that there's so many of our folks, 6,000 of our brothers and sisters living on the streets, 60% of them are African-American, and a significant portion of them are seniors. So the first thing that we need to do is, one, make sure that we can prevent homelessness wherever it occurs, provide housing and housing supports, using every available means for vulnerable families, for seniors, for people with disabilities, and other folks that are surviving on fixed income. We need to expand the universal basic income or guaranteed basic income program that we piloted here in the city, and make sure that more people, not just the 300 families that could benefit from that, actually could be served better. We need to make sure that we have mental health services for those who need it. About 30% of the problem that people identified who were asked as part of that point in time count were that if people had had a mental health intervention, substance abuse intervention, that there's a good chance that they would not have been on the streets. So part of the problem is financial. Part of the problem is substance abuse and mental health services, and almost all of the problem is a question of political will in terms of how we use our regional resources here in the Bay Area to make sure that we don't let this situation get further out of hand than it already is.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate these answers. This wasn't performance theater. Thank you for the thoughtful answers that the candidates have given thus far. At this time, we're going to open it up to the community, and I've seen a lot of questions and comments flying back and forth on the chat. Too fast for me to gauge them all. But Ruby, I'm going to ask if you could pick out one of these questions that you believe we should start with, please. Community question.
I think, Dr. Cruz, were you able to gather some of the questions on the chat? Did you have one? I think you did.
Thank you so much, Reverend Harry, and thank you so much, Ruby. Realizing the time, y'all, it's 5:55. And so I think for this final question, Ms. Ruby, if we could give everybody 1 minute for a closing statement. Some of you are really familiar with our people's history, and many of us have not really been taught our histories in a good way. Before we ask this final question, with your permission, I want to burn a little bit of sage, because this has been heavy. It has been intense. And I just want to thank all of you that have spoken, and all of you that have spoken on the chat, and all of you that are here caring for our community in a good way. And so as I light a little sage, I want to ask all of you, if you're able to, when you're ready, just take a deep breath in and hold it. Breathe out. May the Great Spirit bless all of you, take care of all of you, and may we find ways to be able to stand up for Oakland in a good way. For this final question, I don't know if you're able to see my screen at this time. Are you able to see the image in front of you?
Yes.
That is Lucy Gonzalez Parsons. And Lucy Gonzalez Parsons was such an amazing organizer out of Chicago that the Chicago Police Department said she is more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. And this is what Lucy Gonzalez Parsons said: never be deceived that the rich will permit you to vote away their wealth. And as we close out, you have been talking a lot about November 7th. And this question is about November 8th. What happens after the vote in November 7th? And what can we do besides voting to make sure that we fight for freedom, justice, and reparations? And if we can give everybody 1 minute, we will start with Miss Alyssa Victory.
Thank you again for hosting this. Thank you for having me and for the work y'all do. Election day is November 8th. So on November 9th, we need to continue what we're doing. We need to continue serving, right? Government is not going to take over all of the amazing work that our community orgs, our faith leaders, our volunteers are already doing, and I don't think it ever will. We need to continue to have a strong accountability metric for whoever is the next mayor, to continue to meet with them, to demand the transparency around our budgeting, around our services, around our staffing, and what is happening with the next vision for this new era that needs to be ushered into our city, where people have a real representative, real access to that representative, and real power to make decisions. I'm running on things like participatory budgeting so that you all can make decisions in what my administration is going to be proposing for council to pass. I have a degree in ethnic studies and will continue to be on the ground serving, organizing, even when it's not my job, my title, even when I don't have a paycheck, because that's what I've been doing my entire life in this city. So I'm gonna get back to serving. I'll continue to be an attorney regardless of what happens in this election. Thank you again. My website is victoryforoakland.com.
Bless you so much. We'd love to call into the space Councilmember Reid.
You know, there are two quotes that I just want to speak to. One of them is Shirley Chisholm, since she was brought up, and she made a quote that said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sideline, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas." And that's something that I've certainly been driving towards, making sure that we lead out with solutions and not excuses. And then the words of Martin Luther King certainly resonate with me in this moment, that we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And this is a time for vigorous and positive action. And I believe that we need to continue to stay engaged, continue to hold us accountable as leaders, regardless of what takes place on November 8th. I have showed that I show up with you, I show up for you, and that we've been able to make some things progress further. I believe that communities like East Oakland, where we've long felt shut out and not heard, that we have that opportunity to really rise up. And I believe as East Oakland rises, so shall this city rise as we work on those deeper issues. I believe that coalitions like the Emerald New Deal, those coalitions birthed in Sabrani Park, will continue to lead out as they are right now, working to engage citizens all over the city to make sure that we deliver more targeted, urgent, and intentional investments into the communities that have been most impacted. And I will lead that charge with them, for them. So hold me accountable. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Council Member. Now we'd love to call into the space Baba Greg Hodge.
Yeah, thank you for the sage. Thank you for the libation of sorts to Lucy Parsons. Thank you all for being here tonight, because you care about your city, you care about your neighborhood, you care about your homies, if you will. Frederick Douglass adds to the mix here, because power concedes nothing without a demand. We have to continue to organize, we have to continue to agitate, we have to continue to be advocates for the things that make sense around safety, around housing, around illegal dumping, around education. We have to employ the arts, and we haven't talked about the arts too much tonight, but make sure that we have artists and residents in every school, to make sure that arts continue to empower and engage our young people. Ultimately, we need to have an energy of kujichagulia, or self-determination, to define, name, create, and speak for ourselves instead of having other people speak for us. So I think that in this moment of transition, in this moment of transformation, we all have a part to play. And I really appreciate the work that Homies Empowerment is doing along those lines. Hey, God bless you, and let the ancestors be pleased.
Thank you so much, Baba Hodge. Just would love to call into the space Councilmember Thao.
I just want to appreciate tonight and thank you, Dr. Cesar Cruz and Reverend Williams, for having us, and everyone who joined us. You know, I would say stay engaged, continue to do the hard work, continue to hold electeds accountable. But again, stay engaged, and we need to work. We need to work to build a pipeline for making sure that working families are at the table where decisions are made, you know, so that we can have politicians who can see the world through our eyes. And not just that, but I just wanted to uplift again that we should support the people's slate. And that is myself, Baba Greg, and Alyssa. Choose the three of us, list them in any order on your ballot, but choose the three of us as we are upholding the people's, we are on the people's slate. And more so than that, just make sure that we are hopeful. We have to give hope to our young people. And so when you are talking to our young people, make sure that we're giving them hope. Make sure that they know that we see them and that we care about them and that they are worth everything. We are nothing without them.
Thank you, Councilmember Thao. Last but not least, Councilmember Taylor, we'd love to call you into the space.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and just be in the circle in this space. When I engage with homies, I am always inspired and appreciative of the thoughtful intentionality with which this organization and its leaders serve. That is the same spirit that I bring as a leader, as a representative, as a neighbor and a family member to those who I serve. When we look at folks talk about following the money,
Lauren Taylor,
is majority
froze.
from Oakland. Again,
Ms. Ruby, could
you-
we do another 30 more seconds for Councilmember Taylor? And before we do so, apologies, Councilmember Taylor, it looks like we were having some Wi-Fi challenges coming from your Wi-Fi. Let's give 30 more seconds, and then thank you everybody for staying an extra 3 minutes. We're gonna have a final word from Reverend Harry after Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you. Hopefully this will hold out for the balance of my time. I am appreciative for the opportunity to just acknowledge that as we follow the money, the support that I've been getting, both dollars and volunteers and other support, has been overwhelming from the Oakland community. And that is because of the partnership, the relationship, the consistency that we have had in working together to address our deepest challenges, particularly those who have been most impacted. I know working through HOMIES, we have worked on a number of initiatives together, just like I have with other community organizations, whether it's community events like the Easter egg hunt, the Halloween trunk or treat, community cleanups, food giveaways, you name it. And it's that consistency that I continue
Thank you,
to
Lauren Taylor.
live into. Thank you.
Councilmember Taylor, thank you so much. Rev, before we close out, just want to thank so much all of you that came. We also made an extension and an invite to a former council member, Ignacio de la Fuente. We're not sure why they weren't able to attend, but an invite was made that way. Thank you all for staying a couple of extra minutes, and now we're going to go ahead and close out with Reverend Harry Williams sharing that last word.
I want to thank each one of I've been to several of these events, and to me, there was not a lot of performance theater, and you spoke from your heart. We really appreciate what you shared. I have a request to ask, and this is going to be a 30-second request, and it's this: we have a community member with us today, Miss Terry Lovett. She lives in East Oakland, deep East Oakland, and her son was murdered by sheriffs in the Los Angeles jail. She is in a crisis situation where she needs legal help. She needs someone who is a lawyer or has legal expertise to give her some counsel in the next few days. And we have looked high and low for someone to provide that kind of help. And I'm going to ask each of you, maybe not right now, but if you would write to us, write something in the chat box, or if you disagree, if you have legal expertise to help her. She's a good person. I've known her for 18 years. She needs our help. In closing, I wanted to say that 2 cycles ago, I had one of these gatherings when Mayor Schaaf was voted into office, and we had every single one of the candidates there who had a chance of winning. And one thing I thought that was so strange was that after the election, I didn't see any of the people who lost. When I listened to you, I listened to some brilliant people with some brilliant minds, some hearts that are truly turned toward our people. Only one of you will win. But I encourage you, those who don't win, to hold up the arms of the person who does win. And even if you don't personally like that person, fight for us, because truly we can make a difference, but we need each and every one of you as we go forward. I want to say on behalf of Homies Empowerment, thank you so much. May God bless you. May God keep you. May your health be blessed. May God bless your families. And may Oakland rise under your leadership. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for the people who have joined us. We're surprised by the numbers of people who are here today. And we really love our community, and we appreciate all who have come. God bless you. Good evening, y'all. Peace.
Thank you.
Good evening. Love you.
Y'all, thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Make sure y'all
Thank you.
vote by
Thank you for
Tuesday.
hosting this, Dr.
Vote.
Cesar. Appreciate you.
Amen.
Good to see you, brother Cesar.
Luck, everybody.
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Gracias
Thank
por
you
estar
all.
aquí. Thank you for being here.
Gracias a todos.
Amen. Thank you.
Have a good night. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Thank
Buenas
you all so much
noches.
for being here. Ms. Ruby, if we can pause the recording.
Mhm.